Australia is the #1 destination for British migrants. But the dream of a new life down under is limited to around 30,000 a year. There was a time when Australia paid Britons to come. It was one of the biggest planned migrations of the 20th century. In the 50s and 60s, 1 million people were sold the dream of a modern British way of life in the sun.
Talk about a culture shock.
And I absolutely hated it.
You were still a pommy bastard.
I think they resented us very, very much.
To entice them, £10 was all it cost.
That seemed to me to be an amazing adventure for the price.
I reckon it was the best £10 I ever spent.
But 1/4 of those that came didn't agree and fled back home. This is the story of 9 Britons who took the migration gamble. But which country would end up claiming the hearts of these £10 Poms?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were here. I've been wasting time when I've got a lot of very important things to tell you. I want to talk to you about immigration, particularly immigration from the United Kingdom.
Following World War II, Australia believed it needed to populate or perish. Despite the end of the war, there was still a fear of the yellow peril. The Australian government wanted only white British stock to help build up and defend the nation.
These are the people we want, and the more of them, the better.
Beginning in 1947, the £10 scheme received financial support from both sides. Britain was happy for the Commonwealth to be populated by its own. And for many working-class Britons, migration offered a fresh start after 6 grueling years of war.
So when I said to Anne, would you like to go to Australia? I had to hold her up.
Albert Lauer grew up in the slums of Paddington in London and joined the army at 18. He was captured twice and spent 3 years in a prisoner of war camp. The experience took its toll.
I think Anne had to have a lot of patience with me. I was apt to go for alcohol, you know, to smooth things over, but she was very good to me. But we got along fine.
Can I have a rise in my pay?
No.
My husband decided. And whatever he said went. He said, we're going to Australia.
The £10 scheme favoured young working-class families like Elizabeth Britton's from Oxford. It was a welcome chance to escape the desolation of post-war England.
Well, I wasn't sorry to leave it behind itself. It was there was nothing. It seemed, you know, food was short, housing was short. They hadn't recovered by then. There was still a lot of rationing.
Sick of the queues and ration books and square-inch packets of fats. We've had 6 years of thinking of essential food in terms of ounces. So perhaps it's not unreasonable we should think about those places overseas where there seems to be plenty of nearly everything.
It was awful. There was no homes, there was no houses, there was whole streets obliterated. I mean, you've got to understand, I couldn't foresee a future for us.
Australia House London is the gateway to Australia, land of the future. Here, scores of thousands of men and women are seeking a wider future on British soil.
We went to Australia House in London and they showed us pictures and films and said that we'd have no worries about accommodation, you'd have a house and blah, blah, blah.
Australia pulled out all stops to entice its quota of 70,000 British migrants a year with propaganda in glorious technicolor. It did the job, with 400,000 hopeful Britons applying to sign on in the first year.
They did make it look...
They made it look better than what it really was.
I promised Dan that, you know, if we did like it, we'd come back.
The catch with the £10 deal was you had to stay for at least 2 years or pay the full fare home. This didn't deter people like Kathleen Upton from Hastings. She was drawn to Australia's warmer climate because her daughter had severe asthma.
But the doctor eventually, she was 3 years old then, said, you know, if only you could go to somewhere where it's warmer, because we'd come through such a dreadfully cold winter that year. And I thought, imagine never to feel cold again. So it looked absolutely utopian, really.
There were several hurdles before Kathleen and her husband would be accepted as £10 Poms. Everyone had to undergo an extensive medical examination and personal interview, even young children, like Kathleen's daughter Vivian.
I said, why did you have to see her? She's only 3 years old. And he said, well, she might have been mentally handicapped or coloured. I didn't realise quite how strong they were against anybody with that wasn't pure white, you know, completely Aryan.
It was known as the White Australia Policy, a series of immigration acts starting in 1901, which meant blacks or Asians need not apply. Anglo-Saxons would slip invisibly into the Australian way of life, or so it was hoped. Britain was soon launching its own campaign to encourage its citizens to go forth and multiply.
The emigration ship looks like a passport to a land of promise. The men who emigrate are all sons of the motherland, Great Britain, that always did and always will breed a race second to none in the world.
During the 50s, almost 300,000 British citizens bet their futures on the £10 scheme. That number would more than triple by the end of the 60s.
What lies ahead of them? People awaiting a chance to live again.
For newlyweds John and Sylvia Cannon from London's East End, the decision to go to Australia would take their lives in a direction they could never have imagined.
It was a maiden voyage, so there was little ships and the press and
water fountains.
Yeah, it was a big send-off.
John left his job as a car salesman in London. He was a keen cameraman and filmed their £10 adventure.
I don't think it was our intention to stay in Australia. I think we were going there for the 2 years that we were required to go there. And then we were going to move on to Canada for a year or two and then maybe go back to England again and settle down.
I think it was more the fun of just travel and saying, let's go, let's do it. Also only cost £10. And that seemed to me to be an amazing adventure for the price.
Few could have afforded the real cost of the voyage. At £120, it was nearly half a year's wages for working class people like John Cannon. For most, it was the first time they had travelled abroad. For some, it would be a final farewell.
We were lucky because we were able to bring our family on board the ship to show them around. You know, it's very impressive. And then they went ashore and I remember hugging my dad. That was the last time.
But Mother was marvellous. She never at any time put any pressure on me to stay. But the very morning she said, it's not too late to change